My father and my wife. I accidentally discovered their secret. The faint glow of the lights barely reached the corners of the room when Jason heard a quiet laugh coming from the kitchen. It was past 3 in the morning. He opened his eyes, caught off guard by the unexpected sound, so out of place at this hour. At first, he thought he had imagined it, but then he heard whispers again. Quietly getting out of bed, Jason peeked into the hallway. The kitchen light was on. His heart sank when he saw familiar figures. Lisa was sitting at the table, and his father, Robert, was leaning toward her, saying something. Her laughter, soft and seemingly too genuine, melted into the silence. Jason froze. Why were they sitting there together in the middle of the night? Why hadn't Lisa woken him up if she needed to talk? Questions flooded his mind, but he decided to say nothing. He just stood in the dark, watching their interaction. "You really know how to make me laugh," Lisa said, her voice quiet but warm. Robert smiled, straightening up. "Life's too short not to laugh. After everything that's happened, we all need a little light." Jason couldn't listen anymore. He went back to bed, lying down, but sleep wouldn't come. The longer he lay there, the more he realized he couldn't just let it go. Lately, everything had felt off. After Jason's mother passed away a few months ago, he had invited his father to move in with them so he wouldn't be alone. At first, it seemed like the right decision. But now, Jason felt like his own home had become foreign to him. Things used to be different. Lisa had always been his rock. She supported him through the toughest moments, helped raise their 2 children, and was the one he could always talk to. But ever since Robert moved in, something had changed. Lisa started spending more time with his father than with him. One morning, as Jason walked into the kitchen, he saw Lisa pouring coffee into 2 cups. She was chatting with Robert, both of them laughing about something he couldn't hear. "Good morning," Jason said, trying to sound indifferent. "Good morning, love," Lisa replied without even looking at him. Robert raised his cup. "Son, your wife is a coffee master. I'd forgotten what a good morning feels like since your mother passed." Jason nodded, but a strange feeling lingered. He sat at the table, but the conversation between Lisa and Robert continued as if he wasn't even there. This pattern repeated itself day after day. Jason started noticing little things that made him uneasy. Lisa no longer talked to him as openly as before. Her attention seemed focused elsewhere. One day, he came home early from work and saw Lisa and Robert working together in the garden, laughing and joking. "Dad, you're becoming quite the gardener," Jason joked as he walked toward them. "Oh no, it's Lisa teaching me. She's amazing," Robert replied with a genuine smile. Lisa turned and glanced at her husband. Her smile was gentle, but something about the moment made Jason feel uncomfortable. One night, Jason decided to act. He waited until Lisa fell asleep and quietly took her phone from the nightstand. It was a boundary he had never crossed before, but his doubts were eating him alive. There was nothing suspicious on the phone, no messages or calls that suggested an affair. But among the recent contacts, he saw Robert's name. Why would she call him when they live in the same house? He thought. The question gnawed at him. The next day, coming home early again, Jason heard laughter from the kitchen. He walked in and saw Lisa and Robert at the table. They didn't notice him right away. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to mask his irritation. "Just talking, love," Lisa replied, looking slightly flustered. "About what?" "Life," Robert said, his tone too light, as if avoiding specifics. Jason said nothing. He just stood there in silence, watching them, the distance between him and Lisa growing more palpable with every passing moment. Jason sat in the armchair near the fireplace, watching the flames dissolve the silence. His mind was restless, filled with thoughts that refused to settle. He recalled his mother, her passing, and that cold day that changed everything. It felt like their family would never be the same again. But the one who suffered the most was his father, Robert. "Lisa, have you noticed how much my father has changed since he moved in with us?" Jason asked, turning his head toward his wife. "Yes," Lisa replied, her voice quiet and slightly hesitant. "But it's normal, isn't it? He lost his wife, your mom. It was really hard for him. Now he's not alone, and that helps." Jason sighed, rubbing his fingers together. "Do you remember how he was after her death?" It was awful. He wouldn't talk to anyone, not even me. He just sat in his room like a ghost. Lisa moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know, Jason. Those months he was living like in a fog. But now, he seems better. He even jokes sometimes. Jason shook his head, as if trying to make sense of his thoughts. Yeah, that's true. But sometimes it feels odd. Like he's come back to life too quickly. I can't explain it. Lisa leaned in, looking at him closely. What are you trying to say? Jason hesitated, carefully choosing his words. After Mom passed, he told me something that keeps replaying in my head. Everything will change now, he whispered. And that was it. Nothing more. Lisa nodded, her gaze steady. Those are powerful words. Maybe he meant that he had to start over. Or, Jason paused, unsure if he should voice his doubts. Or he's just hiding something. I don't know, Lisa. But sometimes there's something about him that unsettles me. Lisa smiled faintly, trying to lighten the mood. You're just worried about him, and that's normal. He's your father. Jason looked back at the fireplace. The flames crackled, casting shadows on the walls, but they couldn't calm his mind. Maybe, he replied softly, but after what he went through, I expected it to take more time. And yet, it's like he's happier than he was before. Lisa opened her mouth to say something but closed it again, lowering her eyes. Do you think it's a bad thing? She asked cautiously. Jason shrugged, as if unsure of the right answer. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking for answers where there aren't any. Lisa nodded, clutching her teacup. Her face remained calm, but a trace of tension appeared in her eyes. Jason glanced at her again, but said nothing more. Robert had always been a man of great inner strength, and after losing his wife, he realized that life didn't end even after the greatest of losses. At first, he withdrew into himself, avoiding family gatherings and rarely leaving the house. But over time, the money he inherited after his wife's death became his main motivation to start living again. He began spending his savings on things he had never considered before. First, there were gym memberships, personal trainers, expensive accessories, and stylish suits that made him look like a much younger man. Robert worked on himself, transforming his body and achieving a level of fitness he had never dreamed of before. Jason had always thought of his father as someone who naturally looked older. But now, Robert was the perfect example of a middle-aged man who could turn heads. He started attracting attention wherever he went, looking much younger than his 47 years. He had more energy than most young men, and it showed in every move he made. Beyond the physical changes, Robert grew more confident. He bought luxury cars, frequented trendy restaurants he once deemed unnecessary for someone his age. Yet, despite all this, he couldn't shake the loneliness that lingered. That's why he decided to live with Jason and Lisa. He realized he needed the presence of others to fill the emptiness in his soul. Lisa was thrilled by this decision. She had always been welcoming and hospitable, so she readily agreed to Robert moving in. But over time, she noticed her mood improving with each passing day. Lisa started feeling happier, and her demeanor grew more energetic and serene. Her attitude toward Robert, who now looked youthful and attractive, began to shift. She started seeing him differently. Lisa had always admitted she liked older men for their experience, maturity, and wisdom, qualities younger men often lacked. Robert became an ideal figure in her eyes. She often joked with Jason that he should take a page out of his father's book. Why don't you take care of yourself like your father does? Lisa said as they sat in the kitchen. Look at him. You see how great he looks, and all you do is work without making time for yourself. Jason always just smiled, knowing that, despite loving him, Lisa often complained about his lack of self-care compared to Robert. And he had to admit, Robert looked better and better with each passing month. Meanwhile, Jason began to feel increasingly disoriented. He couldn't ignore how much time Lisa and Robert were spending together. They worked out together, attending one of those expensive gyms Lisa hadn't cared about before Robert moved in. Robert was her constant companion in these activities, and Jason noticed how often their gazes met when they laughed, talked, or simply spent time together. Although Jason was grateful to his father for moving in with them, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more between them than just friendship. Lisa was turning to Robert with questions that had once been reserved for her husband. Jason saw how their relationship was slowly evolving into something beyond mere family ties. These moments began to create tension within the household. Jason tried to find peace within himself, but he increasingly realized that his inner turmoil clashed with what was happening around him. Could his wife truly be so happy with his father? And if so, what was he supposed to do? The next morning, Jason woke up later than usual, struggling to sleep soundly at night. The strange events of the previous night still lingered in his mind. Lisa had gone to another room to sleep, claiming she was uncomfortable in their bed. Jason glanced at her side of the bed and noticed it had sunk slightly. He was surprised. Everything had been fine before. He offered to switch sides with her, but she refused, saying, "Why should you suffer?" Lisa left to sleep in another room. Jason didn't think much of it at first, brushing it off as an innocent decision. But during the night, he awoke several times to faint. Strange sounds, though he didn't pay them much attention. The next morning, Jason walked out of the bedroom to find Lisa already in the kitchen, making coffee. She was dressed in her bathrobe, her face calm as if nothing unusual had happened. "Lisa, did you hear anything strange last night?" Jason asked. "I thought I heard someone walking around the house." Lisa looked at him with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "No, I didn't hear anything. Maybe it was just a dream?" Jason eyed her suspiciously, but decided he was probably just tired and imagining things. He didn't push further but couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. As the day went on, Jason began to notice more unusual details. Coming home from work earlier than usual, he walked past a room and heard muffled voices. He paused, thinking Lisa might be on a call, but when he opened the door, the room was empty. Silence. No phone. Jason felt unsettled, but told himself it was just his imagination. That night, as he was getting ready for bed, he heard the faint sounds again, someone quietly moving through the house. Moments later, the bedroom door gently closed on its own. Jason sat up, startled, listening intently to the silence. The room was dark, and he couldn't tell if what he'd heard was real or just in his head. The next morning, Jason asked Lisa again. "Lisa, were you up last night? I keep hearing these sounds, like someone's walking around." Lisa met his gaze, her expression completely neutral. She approached him, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's just the stress, Jason. You haven't been sleeping well lately." But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The more he focused on these odd events, the more suspicious they seemed. He started to notice Lisa acting slightly off, like she was hiding something. And most troubling of all, the emotional distance between them grew with each passing day. One night, Jason decided to stay awake and wait. He hid behind the door, watching Lisa. As the house fell silent and everyone went to bed, he heard the sounds again. Lisa got up quietly, left the bedroom, and walked toward the far end of the house. Jason jumped to his feet and followed her to the door. He couldn't believe what he saw. Lisa was standing in front of Robert's room. Trying not to make any noise, Jason stayed hidden, observing her. Lisa opened the door and walked in without hesitation. Jason stood in the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what had just happened, but he felt like he had witnessed something that would turn his understanding of his family upside down. Jason began to feel anxious and returned to his room. Lying in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about why Lisa had gone to Robert's room. Were they hiding something from him? He decided not to accuse anyone just yet, but instead observe what would happen next. With these thoughts, he fell asleep. Jason decided not to rush to conclusions, but he started watching them both closely. The next day, Jason was sitting on the bed, holding Lisa's phone in his hands. His eyes couldn't believe what he had just read. A message from Robert left little room for doubt. "Thank you for last night. It was wonderful. You make me feel alive again." His heart began to race, and his mind filled with questions. What did it mean? How was he supposed to interpret these words? He reread the message, searching for any excuse to dismiss it. It was well known that Lisa was good at giving massages. She often helped Robert after his workouts. But this message made him question everything he believed before. Why were they meeting alone at night? Why would Robert write something like that? Jason tried to calm himself, thinking it could just be a misunderstanding. Maybe they were simply talking about physical recovery, but something deep inside him wouldn't let it go. Jason decided not to jump to conclusions. He didn't want to accuse his wife or father of anything just yet, but ignoring their behavior was no longer an option. He resolved to quietly observe and try to understand what was really happening. Over the next few days, Jason tried to be less noticeable. He stayed home more often and avoided interrupting their conversations. He noticed how frequently Lisa and Robert spent time together. They often met in the living room, laughing and talking about things Jason didn't recognize. In the evenings, they relaxed together, and Jason increasingly felt like an outsider in his own home. One night, he woke up again to strange sounds. This time, he was more determined. He got out of bed quietly, carefully opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. The footsteps echoed through the house, and he heard someone whispering softly. Jason clenched his fists, trying not to make any noise. He crept to Robert's door and stopped. Silence. Then he heard something rustling inside. The door opened. He quickly stepped back, trying not to attract attention. Returning to bed, his heart raced as though he had just run a marathon. By morning, Jason was so exhausted from sleepless nights that he decided to confront Lisa again. She was calmly preparing breakfast, looking as though nothing had happened. Jason sat at the table and looked at her. "Lisa," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's going on between you and my father? I found messages that made me uneasy." Lisa raised her eyes from her coffee cup and looked at him with mild surprise. "What do you mean? I don't understand what you're talking about." Jason placed her phone on the table and showed her the message he had found. "This isn't just about massages, Lisa. What does this mean?" Lisa was silent for a few seconds. She raised her hands to her face, as though trying to find the right words, but said nothing. She seemed aware that every move she made now mattered, and whatever she decided to say could change everything. Jason sat across from her, waiting for an answer. He didn't know what else to do. "Jason, she began but stopped again. She couldn't bring herself to say what she had been about to. Jason didn't interrupt or try to make excuses for her. He just waited. After all these nights and efforts, he needed answers. "Tell me the truth. What's going on between you two?" Jason sat in his room, deeply lost in thought. Lisa had convincingly explained that nothing was happening between her and Robert. She even added that she had simply helped him with a massage because he had severe muscle pain after intense workouts. Although Jason wasn't entirely at peace, he decided to believe her. Lisa didn't seem like she was hiding anything, and he didn't want to overthink the situation unnecessarily. He decided to talk to his father to get his perspective. Robert was in the living room, sitting in an armchair and reading the newspaper. Seeing Jason, he smiled and set it down on the table. "Jason," he said, his voice full of gratitude, "I want to thank you for letting me live here. It means a lot to me, you know? It hasn't been easy dealing with these changes, and I feel very comfortable here. Lisa, she's such a wonderful woman. She's truly kind and generous. You should cherish her." Jason stood nearby, looking at his father. He felt his heart calm a little. Robert seemed genuinely thankful, which gave Jason some hope. Maybe he was overreacting, and nothing serious was going on. Yet something still gnawed at him. If it was just about massages, why had Lisa gone to Robert's room at night? Why had she left him alone in their bed? Something about this situation didn't add up. Robert continued speaking, seemingly unaware of his son's inner doubts. "Jason, you're a good man. You work hard, but don't forget to appreciate what you have. You have a great wife. Take care of her. Women like Lisa are rare." Jason nodded, but inside he felt a chill. He decided that maybe it was all in his head, and for now, he wouldn't make any hasty decisions. Still, his intuition told him that something wasn't right. The conversations with Lisa and Robert left him deep in thought. For the next few days, Jason tried to calm himself. He decided not to jump to conclusions. But the more he observed Lisa and Robert's behavior, the more doubts arose. Something kept gnawing at him. The looks they exchanged when he wasn't around, the tones of their voices, even the way they interacted. It all felt off. One evening, while sitting alone and reflecting, Jason made up his mind. He couldn't just sit and wait anymore. He needed to act. If his suspicions were correct, he had to find out what was really going on between Lisa and Robert. But he didn't want to confront them outright. Jason decided that the best way to uncover the truth was to install a few hidden cameras around the house. He carefully prepared everything. He purchased several miniature cameras that could be easily hidden in the rooms where Lisa and Robert often spent time together. Jason chose their hiding spots meticulously to ensure they wouldn't be noticed. He placed one in Robert's room, another in the living room where they frequently chatted, and another near the bedroom doors. Even when Robert occasionally caught Jason entering his room, everything felt so natural that Jason didn't doubt his plan. All that remained was to wait and see if the cameras would capture anything that could give him answers to the questions he had been carrying for so long. Jason was ready to discover the truth, whatever it might be. The next day, as Jason sat down for breakfast, Lisa entered the kitchen cheerfully, announcing that she had been invited to a party organized by the gym where she trained. It wasn't just any party. It was an awards ceremony for longtime members, and Lisa was among the honorees. She explained that Robert had also been invited since they both attended the same gym. "This is an important event," Lisa said, standing by the table. "There will be awards and interesting people. You wouldn't want me to look out of place, would you?" Jason sensed a slight tension in her voice. She seemed confident he would agree. But Jason was hesitant. He didn't like the idea of Lisa going to the party without him, especially with his father accompanying her. It felt like there was something between them that he couldn't understand. "It's important to you. I get that," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "But I can't afford to give you money for a new dress right now. I just don't have the extra cash." Lisa paused for a moment, and Jason saw a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. She didn't argue, simply sighed and returned to her chair. But just then, Robert's voice came from the doorway. "That's not a problem," he said, walking into the kitchen. "I'll give Lisa the money. She should look her best at the party." Jason glanced at his father, and his heart sank. Robert, freshly out of the shower, looked impeccable once again, his appearance flawless, as if he lived at the gym. Jason felt a wave of discomfort. His father's gesture seemed excessive for a simple party gift. Jason had many thoughts, but didn't know whether to voice them. Lisa smiled when she heard Robert's offer, adding to Jason's unease. Their closeness felt too much. "Thank you, Robert," Lisa said with a bright smile. "I'll make sure to look amazing at the party." "You're so thoughtful." Jason stayed silent. He didn't know what to say, so he decided to say nothing at all. Lisa and Robert agreed to go shopping together to find her a dress. Afterward, Lisa left for the mall with Robert. Jason stayed home, deep in thought about everything that had happened. His suspicions grew stronger. He couldn't understand why Lisa's behavior had changed so much, why she seemed so intent on looking perfect for this party. It wasn't just a casual gathering of gym friends. A few hours later, Lisa returned home. She came in with several shopping bags and immediately rushed to Jason, not waiting for his reaction. She eagerly began unpacking the bags, pulling out dresses, 2 elegant evening gowns, one white and the other black. She looked stunning in them, exuding elegance. She posed in front of the mirror, giggling, as if trying to catch Jason's attention. "Look at me. Aren't I gorgeous? Which one do you think I should choose?" Lisa asked, spinning around to show him. But then she reached into another bag and pulled out yet another item. Jason's eyes blurred when he saw what it was. A set of new lingerie. It was an expensive, luxurious set, black and red with delicate lace. Lisa held it up with a playful smile. "And this is from Robert. Not from you, who can't spare any money for me," Lisa said with a small laugh. "But I want to feel confident. You didn't give me the money for this." Jason felt his face go pale. He didn't know what to say, so he remained silent. It was hard for him to accept everything unfolding before him. He didn't like how easily she brushed it all off. "Okay," he said quietly. "You look great, Lisa." He felt shattered. The pressure from Lisa's behavior and her growing closeness to his father pushed him further toward uncovering the truth. This time, he wasn't going to let it slide. When Robert arrived home, Lisa was already ready, dressed in everything new that Robert had bought for her. Jason stood in the corner of the room, watching Lisa and Robert prepare for the party. She looked stunning. The dress hugged her figure, and her red lipstick added to her allure. Lisa smiled, addressing Robert with compliments as he told her she looked incredible. Jason couldn't help but notice how stylish his father looked in his tuxedo. Robert, taller and with well-groomed hair and a confident expression, stood out. These details only added to the uncomfortable image in Jason's mind. He didn't like how close Lisa and Robert seemed, how they interacted, or how they looked together. Feelings of jealousy and anxiety made Jason feel small and invisible in the shadow of this seemingly perfect pair. "The party will be fun," Robert said, glancing at Jason. "It might even go until morning. You'll be here waiting for us, right?" Lisa added with a smile, "Yes, don't wait up for us, Jason. Robert and I will have so much fun." Her tone was lighthearted and carefree, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that there was a subtle tension between them that he couldn't understand. His suspicions only grew stronger. Lisa was with Robert, and Jason was left alone in his own home, hearing words that cast a shadow over his relationship with Lisa. "All right," Jason replied quietly, trying to mask his emotions. "Come back when you're done." He watched as Lisa and Robert left the house together. They got into the car, and Jason felt a weight settle over him as he stood alone. The situation seemed increasingly strange and convoluted, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to continue living in uncertainty. After their car disappeared into the distance, Jason sat in his chair, deep in thought. What is really going on between his father and Lisa? Why did he feel such aversion to all of this? But most of all, he wondered what would happen when they returned. Jason felt miserable being left alone at home while Lisa and Robert attended the party. He considered disabling the hidden cameras he had set up in the house, but something stopped him from doing it. Jason eventually fell asleep, unable to stay awake until Lisa and Robert returned. They came home early in the morning, but Jason, still asleep, didn't notice. When he woke up, Jason sat at the kitchen table and called Lisa and Robert to join him, wanting to hear about the party. He listened closely to every word Robert said. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but his suspicions lingered. His heart raced when he saw them walk out of the same room after he called them. It was hard for Jason to believe that nothing had happened between them. Everything looked too suspicious. His mind raced, and he couldn't process what he was hearing calmly. "Don't worry, son," Robert repeated, trying to reassure him. "We were just tired after the party. Nothing happened. I asked Lisa to help me to my room, we talked a bit, and then we fell asleep." But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He couldn't let this situation go without investigating further. Maybe he was being overly suspicious, but all these small details kept fueling his doubts. After they finished their conversation, Jason decided to leave the house for a while, leaving Lisa and Robert behind. This was his chance. He grabbed his phone and checked the hidden cameras he had placed in the house. At first, he hesitated, but then he felt this was the moment to see the truth for himself. Jason left the house to avoid being noticed and waited. Watching what unfolded wasn't easy, but he couldn't stop himself. A few hours later, he returned home and checked the footage from one of the cameras. He pressed play and began watching carefully. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but small moments caught on camera became increasingly troubling. They laughed together frequently, talked closely, and their behavior grew less restrained than usual. Jason's heart raced. He was now almost certain there was something between them. He rewatched the footage, and each moment made his heart beat faster. Now, seeing Lisa and Robert interact so freely, Jason knew he needed to act. What would he do with this information? Jason didn't mention the hidden cameras to either Lisa or Robert. The next day, he told them he needed to visit an old friend he hadn't seen in a long time. He said it would be in another city, so he would stay there for a couple of days. Jason wanted to see Lisa's reaction, but she surprised him. At first, Lisa didn't want him to leave, saying, "Why go so far away?" But then Robert calmed her, saying, "Let him go. He needs to spend time with his friend. If you want, we can go shopping and get you something nice so you don't feel lonely." Lisa's expression changed instantly after Robert's words. She lit up like a child and told Jason, "Fine, go ahead. Have a good time." Jason pretended to leave, driving away from the house just far enough to be out of sight. He parked and monitored the hidden cameras. As Jason watched through the cameras, he saw Robert and Lisa talking in the living room. At first, everything seemed normal. They were discussing everyday matters. But soon, their behavior turned more peculiar. Lisa laughed and leaned toward Robert while he hugged her and kissed her cheek. Their hugs grew longer, and Jason saw Lisa running her fingers along Robert's neck. Their actions became more intimate, and Jason realized this was more than just friendship or shared time. Jason's heart pounded as he watched Robert and Lisa move to the couch and sit together. Lisa gently stroked Robert's shoulder and began talking about deeper topics. Jason couldn't believe his eyes when he saw them kiss. It seemed all his suspicions had become reality. His wife and his father, two people he loved and trusted, appeared to have a relationship far beyond familial ties. Jason didn't know what to do. He felt betrayed and broken. He had never imagined something like this could happen in his family. He sat in his car, unsure whether to confront them or run away from this painful truth. He wasn't ready to see his closest relationships in this light. But now he knew there was something more between Lisa and Robert. And this was just the beginning of what Jason needed to do to figure out his next steps. Jason stayed away from home for 2 days, avoiding contact with Lisa and Robert. But he knew he had to play it smart and not reveal everything he had seen. Jason returned home quietly after 2 days, stepping inside and hearing voices from his bedroom. He crept closer and saw Lisa and Robert talking, their faces tense. They didn't see him, but Jason began recording on his phone, catching part of their conversation. "We need to resolve this before he finds out." Jason held his breath when he heard those words. His heart raced, and a wave of anger and pain swept over him. He hid behind the door, careful not to reveal himself. Lisa and Robert continued their conversation, unaware of his presence. "We can't delay any longer, Lisa," Robert said, his voice tense. "He'll notice something is wrong if this drags on. We have to make a move, or everything will fall apart." Lisa paused for a few seconds before replying, her voice filled with concern. "I know, Robert, but I can't just leave Jason like that. He loves me, and I don't want to hurt him, but he can't find out what's between us." Jason felt his world crumble, his heart breaking into pieces. They were planning something that would make him see things in an even worse light. He heard Robert say one more sentence that shattered what little peace he had left. "We can't leave this unresolved. If we don't figure out a way out, everything will be ruined." Jason couldn't take it anymore. He decided he didn't want to be part of this deceit, didn't want to stay with people who had caused him such pain. He approached the door and paused for a moment before stepping in. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Lisa and Robert turned to face him, their faces paling as they saw him. Jason knew he could no longer hide his feelings. "What are you doing?" Jason's voice was cold, heavy with the iron distance that had suddenly grown between him and the people he had once loved. "What were you, Robert, and you, Lisa, planning to hide from me?" Lisa tried to step toward him, but Jason moved back, making it clear he didn't want to hear anything at that moment. His anger mixed with despair as he waited for an answer. Lisa's face was pale with guilt and desperation. Silence filled the room as Jason stood there, unsure of where to go next. He was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant his life would never be the same again. Jason stood at the threshold of his bedroom, his heart pounding like a relentless drum, and his thoughts raced uncontrollably. He couldn't believe this moment had come, that everything he feared and suspected had become a reality. Lisa and Robert, his own wife and father, the people he loved and trusted most, stood before him, looking like two guilty children afraid to meet his gaze. He stepped forward, every muscle in his body tensed with emotion. His voice was dry and sharp as he said, "I've seen everything, Lisa. I've heard everything. I installed hidden cameras in the house. You can't lie to me anymore. You can't hide anything." And it was true. Every detail, every second he had watched through his phone's screen had shaken him to his core. Jason wasn't sure where to start. He could end everything, break their bond, throw them out of his house. But what would that accomplish? He felt as though he understood why this had happened, but couldn't forgive it. Lisa froze in place, her eyes widening in shock, and her lips trembled as she realized her secrets were no longer safe. She lowered her gaze, and Jason saw tears begin to streak her cheeks. She stood silent for a few seconds, as though searching for words that might explain everything. but when she spoke, her voice faltered. Jason, I didn't know what to do, Lisa said, tears pouring from her eyes, her words sounding like a plea for forgiveness, even though her soul was visibly shattered. I didn't want to lie to you. I didn't want you to find out this way. Jason stood motionless, unsure of what to say. He felt betrayed by the entire world, his emotions in turmoil, and his heart pierced by pain. At the same time, he felt an overpowering rage. He had never suspected the people closest to him could do something like this. Breathing became difficult, but he forced himself to ask, "How did this happen, Lisa? How could you betray me like this? And with my father?" Lisa sat on the edge of the bed, hugging herself as though trying to protect herself from something. She glanced at Robert, and it was as though there was an invisible connection between them that Jason couldn't understand. Robert stood slightly to the side, silent, making no effort to justify his actions. Jason turned to him, and his anger only grew stronger. "He was my first love, Jason," Lisa said, her voice quiet but every word hitting Jason like a stone to the heart. "When I saw him again, everything fell into place. It was something powerful, irresistible. We couldn't stop." Jason felt as though the ground beneath him was collapsing. Breathing became even harder as he struggled to contain the tidal wave of emotions. Lisa continued, "I've always loved you, Jason, and I truly believed you were my destiny. But when I saw Robert again, my feelings for him came rushing back. It was like magic, taking me back to our past. I can't explain why it happened. I didn't seek it out, it just happened." Jason listened to her, each word tearing his soul apart. How could she not explain why she was betraying him with his own father? How was this possible? Robert, standing nearby, said nothing. He merely lowered his head, as though silently admitting his guilt. But this only deepened Jason's sense of betrayal. He was his father. How could he allow this to happen? "You don't understand, Jason," Lisa said, her tears now flowing freely, like a waterfall. "I never wanted to lose you. I tried to be your wife, but part of me has always been with him. I can't make myself choose between you. It's terrifying. You can't choose between me and my father?" Jason's voice was full of despair and disappointment. "You've already chosen him, Lisa. You've chosen him, and you're betraying me. How can you even say that?" "Jason, it's not that simple," Lisa said as she approached him, trying to take his hand. But Jason recoiled. "I don't want to lose you," Lisa continued, her voice pleading. "I love you, but I also can't push Robert away. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop this." Jason now fully understood that everything he had seen on the cameras was real. His life had turned upside down, and he no longer felt certain about anything. He stood there, feeling like a broken man, standing before the two people he had loved most in the world. His heart ached, and he was consumed by anger and despair. "You have no right to say that," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You've destroyed everything, Lisa. Me, our family. I trusted both of you, and you both betrayed me." He took a step back, as though signaling a final goodbye. At that moment, Jason didn't know if he could ever forgive such betrayal. He didn't know if he could ever trust the people he had loved so deeply again. Lisa remained standing before him, and Robert, his father, stood off to the side, silent and visibly shaken, unsure of what to say or do. But Jason already knew one thing. He couldn't stay in this house anymore. He couldn't live the way he had before. Everything had changed, and now he had to decide what to do next. Jason sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze lost in the distance, and his heart torn apart by pain and betrayal. Lisa and Robert stood before him, trying to explain themselves, but every word they said only pushed them further away. Then, as they continued talking, Jason remembered Robert's suitcase. It was the same suitcase his father often kept under the bed, as if hiding something important. Today, feeling like he had nothing left to hold back, Jason decided to check it. Everything in the room seemed to freeze as he slowly approached the suitcase. His hand trembled as he unlocked it. He pulled out several old papers, some of which were simple notes. But one caught his attention, a note written in his mother's handwriting. "My dear Robert, I know something is wrong, and it's not just my suspicions. Lisa has changed, and I see how she's looking for something more. I see how you're both trying to hide something deeper, but I know you. I know your weakness, and I'm afraid it will be your undoing. I don't want Jason to learn the truth because it will break him. You need to decide what's more important to you." Jason felt his breath catch. His heart pounded in his chest, and he couldn't believe what he was reading. His mother knew? She knew everything before her death? These were her words, her questions to Robert. She must have suspected something was wrong long ago, but had left the notes so her son could uncover the truth. Jason looked at Lisa, then at Robert. Everything became even clearer. His father had tried to hide it all. And though the note was written long ago, it was undeniable proof that Robert had known about Lisa's feelings before they began their deceit. His mother had suspected it, seen it as a path to tragedy, but left it for her son because she didn't want to tear the family apart. Now, Jason sat there with a broken heart and mixed emotions. She knew, Robert. She knew everything, Jason said, his voice devoid of mercy. She saw what was wrong with you. She left this for me. Robert lowered his gaze, his face hardening, but he said nothing. Lisa stood nearby, silently wiping her tears, but even her tears couldn't convince Jason of their innocence. Both of them knew they couldn't justify their actions, and this note was the final blow to their lies. Jason rose from the bed and threw the note onto the table. His voice became cold and sharp. "Mother knew, and now I know," he said, looking at both his father and wife. "And I can't be a part of this deceit anymore." That was enough. He no longer wanted to be in this room, no longer wanted to live with people who had destroyed everything he loved and built his life upon. He took a step toward the door and paused without looking back. "I don't want to see either of you again," Jason said, refusing to look at Lisa or Robert. Without waiting for a response, he walked out of the house. That night, he found no peace, no place to escape from this horrific reality. But he knew one thing. This was the end. This was his step toward a new beginning. He was now free from the deceit, from the betrayal of people who, despite everything, would always remain his family. But he was no longer willing to remain trapped by them. Jason sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the house. His heart beat rapidly, and his mind raced faster than he could handle his emotions. All these years, he had lived in a world of lies, where everything he loved and trusted had turned out to be false. Now, after seeing all the evidence, he knew he had to act. He couldn't let everything remain as it was. Now, he had one chance to regain control and restore his dignity. The first step was confronting his father. Jason knew he couldn't allow Robert to escape accountability for his betrayal. When Robert returned home, Jason was ready for the conversation. His father sensed that the atmosphere had changed, but tried to act as though nothing had happened. "Dad, we need to talk," Jason said without even looking up. His voice was cold and calm, but inside, Jason felt immense tension. "What's wrong?" Robert asked, sitting on the couch, already suspecting something was amiss. "This isn't just betrayal. It's an unforgivable act. And you don't deserve forgiveness," Jason said, taking the car keys from his father. "The car you bought with my mother's money is no longer yours. It's mine, and I'm taking it back." Robert silently packed his things, trying not to break down, but Jason felt no pity for him. He knew it was the only right step. When Jason was left alone, his next step was Lisa. He didn't want to wait any longer, knowing she needed to face the consequences of what she had done. Jason planned everything coldly and meticulously. When Lisa came home, he was ready for anything. "Lisa, how could you do this to me?" Jason's voice was calm, almost emotionless. She began to justify herself again, desperately trying to hide her guilt. For all those years, Jason had tried to trust her, but now there was no room left for forgiveness. "You betrayed me with my own father," he said, his words sharp and unwavering. Lisa froze for a moment, then began to cry, trying to defend her actions. But Jason didn't allow her to continue. "You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I believed in. And now, everyone will know the truth." Jason decided to show her just how much things were about to change. Within minutes, he uploaded the footage he had captured using the hidden cameras. The video revealed everything: the betrayal, Lisa's relationship with Robert, Everyone who knew Jason saw it, and soon the news spread, not just through their town but among their wider circle. A few days later, as Jason sat alone in his now empty house, he reflected on what had happened. Without Lisa and Robert, the home felt like a hollow shell. He looked at the shattered remnants of the family he had fought so hard to preserve and realized there would be no more happy moments. Everything had changed. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, and these painful memories would stay with him forever. Can anyone truly be trusted? Jason wondered, posing the question to himself. He remained alone, and though everything had fallen apart, he felt that exposing the truth was the only way to preserve a shred of his dignity. Now he was ready to move on, but he knew he wasn't the same person he had been before. He had more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. He would never be naive again. Now, he had to find his own path forward. What do you think? When betrayal comes not only from a partner but also from close family, how would you react in Jason's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments.